My name's David Perry, and I was in the U.S. Navy from January 1964 till November of 1967 when I got an early out to go back to Ball State. I joined the Navy in the dental department, and I made crown and bridge work and partials, but I was assigned to the Marine Corps because the Marines have no medical or dental people. So I wore a Marine uniform with Navy patches. I joined the Navy. I was not drafted. It was during the Vietnam times. And it was an honor to serve my country. And I wanted to represent freedom. My grandfather was in World War I. My dad was in World War II. And they were both in the Army. So it made me feel good to do that. I had a very good education in the Navy. I mean, as far as character development, I learned how a lot of different people, which I think and their actions, which helped me in my career in banking then, because you were able to evaluate people with all kinds of personalities, and it made me dedicated to go back to school and do well. It made me more dedicated to go there to get an education, what it meant, since, like I say, I saw lots of different types of people. Some people had no ambition, some people did, but myself, it gave me the drive to go back and succeed in school, and I know that school meant much more to me at that time than it did the first time. I had to head right to Ball State because I got a 3-month early out, and they said, now you check in with your reserve company. I thought, well, they just want you to sign up again. So I didn't do it. So my mother called me, said, I think you better come home this weekend because there's a letter here that says that you haven't reported to the reserve facility, and if you don't come, they're going to arrest you in like a week. So I came home, and it was exactly what I thought. As soon as I went there, they said, I know it's inactive, but we want to see if you would like to re-enlist. I said, no, thank you, and they said, okay. That's all it was.
In 1972, the draft was still active. So people need to remember that during those years, there was a lotto system in place. And you would pick a number, just like the lotto today. They had little ping pong balls with numbers on them, 1 through 365. And there was this group of men that were responsible for selecting the numbers for the next cycle of draftees. So if the lowest number would be the first to be drafted, the highest number, which would be 365, would be the last one to be called up for that cycle. Well, my number was 10 out of 365, so I knew that after I got out of high school, that I would be called to the service. So I thought, well, my draft number was low. And in those years, the draft just wasn't for the Army, it was also for the Marines. And in some cases, you didn't really have a choice which service you were going to go into. So I volunteered. I volunteered to go in the Air Force. My brother had returned from Vietnam. He was severely wounded. And I wanted to follow my big brother and avenge his wounds and his trauma. And he talked me out of the Marine Corps. And he said, you always want to learn how to fly, so you can fly in the Marines, but if you really want to learn superlative skills and also learn how to fly and have the best possible facilities, enlist now, even though it's 4 years instead of a draft of 2 years, and you'll learn how to fly and you'll be able to travel and learn. For me, it was also a sense of obligation at a time of war based on a family tradition. My family's had a tradition of being in the military. My father was an artillery officer during the Second World War. My grandfather operated troop trains in France during the First World War. And my great-great-grandfather was a Union infantryman. Because you are given a lot of responsibility at a time when your counterparts in the civilian world, either in college or in school, or working on the farm, whatever, that are 18, 19 like you are, they don't necessarily have this, or they're not necessarily given the amount of responsibility that you are given, almost straight across the board in the military at that age. So you grow up very quickly. we were always on alert status. At that time, it was classified. We had it was an F-111 base. We had 3 squadrons of F-111s, a total of about 75 aircraft. It was the first supersonic, swept wing, all-terrain, all-weather fighter bomber. It was a very, very sophisticated aircraft. And we had a select few of those aircraft that had tactical nuclear weapons on board, which at the time was classified. Once again, to be dispersed in the event that the Soviets came across the line in East Germany. And when we went on alert status, we never knew if that was a training exercise or if it was the real thing. So you're always on edge. You're always training right up to the limit of your capacity and to your stress level. And that was being repeated all around the world at the same time.
The Korean War was started and going big time. And I had to face the reality at my age. I was 20 years old, going to be 21. I had to figure out where I was going to fit into that. And I decided that I was going to pick a service that I could get the most benefit from personally, and I joined the Air Force. And that meant that I had to commit 4 years of my life, and I don't regret 1 year of it. It was just a great, great experience, and ended up, after all my training, ended up in Korea in December of '51. Was there for a year at K-9 Air Base down in Busan, and our squadrons flew the old B-26 night missions over Korea, and I was an aircraft mechanic and engine mechanic on an airplane.
It was during the time of Vietnam, and we still had the draft, and so I was in college at the time, and at the end of every semester they would check on you to make sure that you were still in school and still passing and so forth. And my senior year, when I was getting ready to graduate, they knew I was going to graduate, and they sent me a letter and says, "Greetings." And I was drafted then into the Army. I mean, in those days, going into the military was probably not the most popular thing because the Vietnam conflict was, there are a lot of mixed feelings here in the States about that. But at any rate, I was drafted into the Army, and I went to, did my basic training at Fort Carson, Colorado. My job was helping to send guys overseas that were taking basic training. And so I befriended a sergeant that was there, and he was going to go to Korea, and Seoul, Korea, which is the headquarters of the Army, was in Seoul for the Pacific. And he said, "You're going to have 2 choices, Vietnam or Korea." And he said, "I'm going over there, put yourself in for Korea, and I'll find a job for you." So I did. I volunteered myself to go to Korea, cut my own orders to go to Korea, and ended up in Korea, and I was in Seoul.
I had my basic training at Lackland Air Base down in San Antonio, where hundreds of thousands were going in at the same time. And I was sent from there to Boston University's aircraft school because service schools were full of GIs. So they were contracting to private universities. And I spent the summer of 1951 in Boston, living on Kenmore Square, 2 blocks from Fenway. And I got to see Mickey Mantle when the Yankees came to town. And back in those days, it's when the Braves were still playing in Boston. They were a good many blocks north of us. We'd take the bus and we could go to the games for paying the tax, whatever the tax was. I don't remember what it was, but that was just a great, great experience. And living right with civilian students. From there back down to Chanute Field, Illinois. When I was transferred to Chanute, we came on the old New York Central, the old steamers in those days. And we had a stop in Fort Wayne, and I went to the office at the railroad depot there and gave them my folks' phone number, and he called them and told them when we'd be hitting the crossings here. And I was standing on the observation car in the back like Harry Truman in his whistle stops type thing. And we hit the crossing, and part of the family was at this crossing, and part was down at 15th Street. And I got to wave to him as we breezed through the town.
There were all kinds being drafted at that time, and there were obviously then some had a lot of maturity, some had none. But the military has a way of making you mature in a hurry, and those that weren't, they either got out or somehow or another they were helped along the way to become mature. But as I look back at it, as I say, it was at that time not the most popular thing, but I look back at it now as a privilege and an honor. And it was, it gave me, I think, more confidence in life. Well, I'm a better person for having been in the military. I benefit from it, and I think every person that's in the military benefits from it. And I think that young people today would benefit from either being in the military or doing something to serve their country.
My grandfather served in World War I. My father was a pilot in World War II. I served 4.5, almost 5 years, from 1975 to 1980. Got in right at the end of Vietnam. Was just over, and was the victim of, not the victim I guess, but one of those people that definitely bought into join the Navy, see the world. And that was the big campaign back then. The war was over. They wanted to glamorize the travel and the exotic ports, and I was a troubled youth just out of high school, just lost my mom, and really didn't have a lot of great sense of direction. And it was a great vehicle for me, and I truly, I joked about it earlier, but I truly wouldn't change a thing. I enlisted sometime around, it was 1978 or 79. I was on the USS Saratoga, and it was 10:30 at night, and the captain came on the speaker and told us and informed us that we were heading for Iran because over 150 some Americans had just been taken hostage. And he talked about torture and the possibility of them, this being an extended hostage crisis, and that we were going to go and be in harm's way. And a lot of guys sat around and talked about what you would do and how tough it must be for those people and their families and things like that. And we went to bed that night. I don't think a lot of people slept very well, but about 5:15, 5:30 in the morning, we remember hearing a lot of noise, a lot of speakers going off, a lot of alarms, helicopter noise, a lot of movement around on the flight deck. And so me and a bunch of guys, we got up, we got dressed, we went up to the flight deck, and it was just breaking dawn. And I'll never forget, you looked out over the ocean, and for as far as you could see was the Sixth Fleet. I mean, you literally, the ocean was just full of U.S. ships, and in every size and shape, and multiple aircraft, the entire Sixth Fleet, multiple aircraft carriers, destroyers, fast frigates, missile destroyers, supply ships, and it was an unbelievable feeling, because you saw this huge amount of manpower and machinery and equipment all being mobilized to sit off the coast of Iran as a show of force. And you knew then that either we were going to get those people back, or somebody was going to pay a very, very heavy price. And I think that if family members of those hostages could have woke up that morning to that picture that we all woke up to, their heart would have been a little bit lighter, because they would have known that their country was out there doing something. And it was a very, very emotional time. And but those friendships that you make when you go through those kind of things, you keep for a lifetime. I'll never forget it.